Welcome to the Hunt Test Hobo Podcast, your place for truckside chats and insights into the retriever game. Whether you're just getting started or you're a seasoned handler, this podcast is another resource for tips, tricks, and insights from both the amateurs and professional trainers' perspectives. Each week, we'll dive into the nitty-gritty of retriever training, sharing stories of success, overcoming challenges, and forging stronger bonds with our dogs. This is the Hunt Test Hobo Podcast. I'm Chris Rud, your host, fellow retriever enthusiast, and student of the game. Let's dive in. Hunt Test Hobo Podcast with Dan Ihrke. How you doing, sir?
Happy.
Man.
Love being able to convey my ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, I'm glad we're able to have this platform that we can do that.
Absolutely.
What is anything new kind of been happening lately that, maybe it's personal life or just, dog training?
Well, as those of you that have probably listened to the first one know that we have a 1,000-acre hunting preserve that we're running. Mm-hmm. And, we started this out in its infancy as a very basic operation. And then over the years, we've been doing this like 30 years now, close to it. And, we keep adding, right? So now we have sporting clays, British wing shooting, dog training, flighted mallard hunting, upland hunting. We've got more ground to manage, more employees. So yeah, just like any business, you have your ups and your downs and your nuances, and but it's exciting at the same time. We're always like massaging new ideas and introducing new concepts, and so yeah, I have a very full life, very full life. But yeah, we've got this British wing shooting thing going on, and it's they've got a big event going on today, and you and I just popped in there, and it was kind of cool to see all the guys in their outfits going out to do their thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, always something new.
It's always busy here.
Yeah.
I mean, it's never quiet unless you come in at night like I do, and it's like 11:30 and everything's dark.
Yep.
And it's all quiet, and then you open a door to check something, to put a dog in a crate, and the whole kennel wakes up.
Yeah.
And then I think, Dan can't sleep right now because I just woke him up.
No way. And I mean, that was like within the first month, we had to be desensitized to dogs barking. So, yeah. But as a dog trainer's life, you get up early anyway. So I'm usually up an hour before they start barking.
Yeah. So you get your little peace and quiet right before.
That's my time. That 1 hour before I have to leave is my only peace and solitude. I'm so tired at the end of the day that the logic part of my brain is permanently shut down for the night. So yeah, I'm like a comet. I burn myself out. There's nothing left.
I've seen that most people do that. Like, I hang out with Clark, and he'll run dogs all day, and then he goes and he plays video games at night, and then it just
yeah. You got to have something to turn the brain machine off.
Yeah.
So
it's always something that's different about amateurs. Like, I work all day, and I'm like, I can't wait to go run the setup.
Yeah.
Like, I can't wait to go train. Yeah.
It's funny if you're like me. You're attracted to the whole concept of dogs. So you have dogs in your house too, and it's like you're running dogs all day long, and then you come home and it's like, hey, there's some more dogs. What am I doing? So yeah, it's a nonstop relationship with canines, but I love it.
Yeah,
as you know.
Yeah. All right. So one of the questions, or one of the topics I wanted to talk about is Upland, specifically the HRC Upland game. You've had tremendous success in that space. It was cool this year at the Spring Grand. I don't know if it's a Grand Committee or just Tracy asked you to be the test dog, because for those that know the Upland game know that, you've been incredibly successful at it. We were looking up some stats, and, you've had 420 consecutive Upland passes. When we figured that out, I was like, that's insane.
Yeah. I was actually kind of surprised at the number 2. And I could not answer the question because it's been so many years. I had actually, my partner in crime, Debbie, who does all my hunt test scheduling, et cetera. She's a meticulous record keeper, and she actually kept all the records. So
wow.
Yeah, she looked back and got back to me within like a surprisingly short period of time and let me know, yeah, that's how many.
Yeah.
So,
that's crazy. So, not 420 upland passes. It's consecutive passes, meaning you haven't failed a dog in the upland, on a weekend upland in a very, very long time.
I don't think I have ever.
You've never failed one in upland?
No, I don't think so. But
it could happen.
Oh yeah. And many times we've been close.
Yeah.
But because of the nature of those tests, taking dogs of all different levels of natural momentum, we'll just call it. Some are really, really, really high, and you go in. Usually, you get 4 tests in one weekend.
Yeah.
So by that 4th test, no collar, live birds,
and those dogs are revved up,
close interaction, honoring all that. Literally being turned loose on a live bird. Yeah. So you work really hard to try to throw as many variables of excitement into your training, and test and double test and triple test, and come up with new ways of distracting. To be able to achieve that.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people, a lot of the big trainers go south for the winter. That's makes a lot of sense, right? Our water is pretty frozen. It gets cold here. You're in central Illinois, but northern side of central Illinois. I'm in northern Illinois. And upland hunting is part of our world, right? Like, I would say, you run a hunting preserve where you're rolling through, a couple hundred members that are here every weekend hunting upland game. Your dad was a big upland pointing side, like you do flushing side, but I think a lot of the people listening to this podcast potentially are, in the South, and there's not a lot of pheasant hunting. There's not a lot of upland hunting. They do quail, but mostly that's with pointers, from what I understand. Mm-hmm. So, you hear other trainers talk about upland training, and they're like, I don't want to do it until the day before I have to, in the 5th of the Grand, and that's the only time that these dogs ever seen upland. Right. And that makes sense because of where they live. They're not upland hunting, but where we are, I take a trip to Iowa every year. I go upland hunting, wild birds with my dogs. If we don't teach our dogs the right way to do upland to the HRC standard, it can be really challenging to actually pass that 5th day of the Grand.
That's right.
And so I think this is an interesting topic, because I think a lot of people who maybe just run the Grand, and the 5th is the big deal about upland, but I think Clark asked me all the time, what we were talking about Fang, and I was like, can I teach him how to do upland? And he's like, well, he got all nervous about it. And then at the end he said, well, just do whatever you do with your dog, as long as that doesn't affect him with blinds. And I think that's a really interesting misconception, that upland hunting has anything to do with blinds.
I hear that a lot. I've heard a lot of people at Hunt Test, the worst thing that I ever did is run that upland test. Now I can't control my dog. And I just kind of laugh at that, because the dogs that go through our upland program are actually much more disciplined. In fact, once they're through the basics program, the more wound up dog I have, the more advantageous it is to put them through the upland training program at that period, because they're going from a lot of conceptual things in the yard and transitioning those into the field, and in the upland training, they're going to be exposed and learn to compose themselves with the highest level of exposures to exciting bird scenarios. So they're going to learn to be the most steady with the most distraction. So it's kind of precedent setting. So before they ever get into their high level work, they already have the predisposition of saying, hey, the more I want it, the more I sit, right? Because that's what we teach with upland, which is opposite of what the average person, they don't understand it, but what they're doing is they're forcing the dog into the sit position, and the dog feels like they're being held back. They're being held back, and there's no decision. It's like they're pushing up against the fence and just waiting for the fence to fall over.
And that's basic. You're talking about at a bucket, waiting for a bird to come. That they get more amped up, and they're just being held back.
Right. And they almost feel like the whole time that they may be able to just break, and any tiny little distraction occurs, and poof, they're gone. Where with the way we teach upland in many, many steps. And when you see the video that we've got out, you'll see I break everything down into tiny little steps, but we teach the dog to sit in order to see a bird, and to sit in order to have a bird come out. So the overall psychology is, in the beginning of it, we're teaching the dog that the quicker they sit, the action of actually standing to sitting, the quicker they put their butt down and push that butt down on the ground, the quicker the object's going to come out. And
I want to interject here for 1 second, because I think you do a lot with walk-ups. And originally, I thought you did a lot of walk-ups because that's what you have to do with a seasoned dog, and that's what you have to do with Upland.
Right.
But last year we were getting ready for the Grand, and my young dog Rex, I think he was 18, 19 months old, getting ready to run the Grand, and I had made some mistakes. And he was feeling exactly what you're describing, that he was being held back rather than the reward, like sitting being, your reward for sitting is getting the bird.
Right.
And I think we probably did 100 to 150 walk-ups with that dog before the Grand.
Yes.
Because like you're talking about, we had to reprogram him back to what he had learned in Upland, that when he sits, a bird is produced, and when he sits, he will get sent. And it was funny, like even by the 4th day of the Grand, like we started to lose him a little bit, but I just waited. So the marks all came out, and I waited, and his butt just went back down to the ground. Because he knew I'm not moving until this butt is on the ground.
Right. And we had that kind of slow response because the fact that we had to kind of reprogram him. And just to throw something in there, because I think it's very interesting, when you have to reprogram a dog, conditioning, which all these things that we do are conditioning, all these training concepts are conditioning. We're using different stimuli to get the dog to perform something, and then, rewarding him every time he does it the way we want, and over and over and over and over. But it takes probably twice as much and as many repetitions to recondition a dog than to condition him the right way in the first place. So, but it's a numbers game. So you do it right twice as many times as you did it wrong. He's going to be on the side of the balance of doing it the way you want him to do. But yes, it does work when you do it from day one, and you never stop doing those walk-ups, and you keep re-stimulating him, and you do walk-ups basically in every environment you possibly can, and you do them right, where the dog gets absolutely zero if he doesn't sit fast, and you do a ton of denial, and denial is the big most important thing. Yeah. Besides,
it's better than any sort of pressure you could ever provide.
Right. That's right. Because so again, painting the picture, the dog learns, okay, I can sit to produce a bird, and then eventually, when the bird is presented, the only way I can get it is to sit while I'm standing. So I call it a number 1 and a number 2 walk up. The number 1 walk up is what we were referring to originally, where you're walking along, you stop, the dog sits, and once he sits all the way down and composes himself, then we throw the bird. And the dog, through a lot of repetition, the dog learns, oh, that's cool. You just sit harder and you're more likely to get a bird.
Yeah.
And then we switch it over to what I call a number 2 walk up, which is where you're walking, and before you stop to tell the dog to sit, you throw it, and he must sit in order to get the bird. And that's where the dog learns the timing. The quicker I get my butt down, the quicker he's going to send me on that bird that already got thrown. And that's when the lots and lots of denial comes in, because now if the dog doesn't sit fast enough, we just pick it up.
Yeah.
And we'll probably do a quick walk at heel, quick sit correction with automatic pressure to get kind of reset the dog into sitting fast, and then redo it. And now the dog sits fast. We give him the bird.
Yep.
Repetition. Eventually that dog says, I see a bird. If I want it, there's an easy way. It's like hitting a switch. Just sit down.
Yeah.
And so again, those young dogs, those level 1 dogs that go through it, come out of it thinking just that, and then they generalize that into our retriever hunt tests. And when they're sitting at the bucket, if there is a thought of moving, which there shouldn't be, because you, again, just use repetition and deny that dog any retrieve it doesn't sit perfectly for. But if there was something to distract, say there's a big gun swing, right? Say I got a real high dog, and I've done a great job of teaching it, but it's just genetically set up to be one of these fire breathing dragons, right? And I got everything right in training. I get to a hunt test, and there's this massive gun swing. And there's an honor dog, so everything, and then also on the gun swing, there's a close winger. So I mean, it's like you swing that gun 180 degrees, and as you're getting to the end of that swing, swing, the winger goes off, right? And so that's a situation that's going to cause a dog to move and then be standing, right? And or hovering or not sitting when that bird comes out, which anybody that's ever done a hunt test with a high dog like that is the scariest scenario in the world, right? If the dog's gone through the Upland program, when that bird comes out, instead of going, I can't help myself, I'm already standing, that fence is not pushing me anymore, I'm just going to push it over and go, he's going to go, yeah, the only way to get that is to sit. So even though he might have moved a foot, instead of continuing that motion, he's going to go, well, let me sit down real quick so I can be sent. Mm-hmm. So we find it makes a more disciplined dog.
Yeah. What about, so let's describe what the Upland game is. The UKC Upland game is the standard is, and you tell me if I'm wrong here, you have to have a dog that will leave your side, quarter the available cover, which means, basically hunt for the bird, kind of going back and forth, searching for the bird, smell a bird, engage that bird by trying to capture it. And when that bird flushes, they must sit. Then we shoot the bird falls. The judge says, or actually no, in UKC, once the bird hits the ground, as long as your dog is, resembles steadiness, whether they're standing or sitting, you can send the dog and the dog can pick it up. And then there's an honor and a walk up, and we won't get into that too much for today, but that's the process, right?
Yeah, that in general, yes. There is a walk up in there, and there's an honor where you have to honor another dog, whether you're doing a double walk up with them or not. But yes, in general, the mainstay of the Upland is you release your dog to hunt, and it's got to go out and quarter and try to use its nose to find a bird. Engage the bird. And what we mean by this is the dog has to actively go in there like they're trying to pursue the bird. They can't point and just stand there and the bird just haphazardly or gets up by chance. They want to see the dog make the bird flush. So the dog's got to have confidence to go in there, push that bird up. And then you can signal your dog to stop. They don't have to sit, but they have to stand. They have to not move, basically, once you signal them to stop. And so they can't go out and just go retrieve the bird. They have to sit and wait to be steady.
And that's a safety issue. That's why they teach it, so that your dog isn't chasing a bird while your friends, that maybe aren't as understand where a dog is. They shoot and they don't see where your dog is. So the point is, the dog flushes the bird, he sits, the bird flies away, somebody shoots the bird. That's what it's simulating.
Yes.
In a real hunting scenario.
And I cut my teeth at the hunting preserve guiding. That's another one of my jobs here was to guide these hunts. So these folks, these customers would come out and they'd ask for a certain amount of birds of different types to be put in the field. So the field would be set. Then I would take them out there and I would provide them with the quote unquote Upland experience, and, if you've ever done one of those scenarios, you a lot of times these guys are paying for it, right? So typically you'll get guys that maybe don't have a whole lot of experience and they just want to pay for a guarantee that they're going to get on birds. And so there's a lot of times when you have guys that just don't have very good gun safety built in yet. And when you have a retriever that's not steady and that dog puts the bird up and just starts chasing it, and you see one of these guys bear down on a bird that's 3 feet in front of your dog, you will very quickly realize why we steady our dogs. On the other hand, you have a steady dog, puts the bird up, flies away from the dog. And so when these guys are kind of unconsciously, excitedly bearing down on that bird and not thinking about
blasting away.
Right. Your dog is nowhere near it because it's steady. So that's why we do it.
So we talked a lot about walk-ups as creating that sit to, that sit and the bird comes out.
Right.
Well, and then you talked about how when a dog is moving, right, they're walking and then they hear the winger noise. And I think that's another, I don't want to get off topic for very long at all because we got a lot of things to talk about, but desensitizing the dog, not desensitizing it, actually sensitizing it to that winger noise, meaning sit versus that a bird's coming.
Right.
And that's a very nuanced difference, that if you do walk-ups a lot and you train them, that noise happens and they see that bird, that means sit down, not get more excited.
Right.
And I think that's a huge difference in your program because of Upland. And, you saw the benefits of that into the regular hunt test scenario, whether that's master or actually it'd be more effective in a master test where you can't say sit to your dog. But my point is that we now transition to, if you go to a hunt test, your goal and Tyler's goal is that you don't blow a whistle when the dog sits.
Right.
Which is completely different than everybody else that I believe does this, is that you guys are conditioning that flush to sit so strong that you don't have to blow a whistle. You condition those dogs to sit to that flush, to sit when they see a bird in the air. And it's funny because like when sometimes when I train, like just do fun bumpers with Rex or Winter, if I throw a bird, sometimes they'll just sit.
Right.
Because they're like, oh crap, I got to sit before I can go.
Yeah.
Right.
So
like the point is that that's so built into them that we don't have to worry about steadiness. So let's talk about kind of what your guys' process is for teaching a dog to be actively trying to kill a bird, to eat a bird, to take that bird out, to, oh, it's left, I'm going to sit now.
So one of the things that happened is to me in the process of coming up with the program that I've come up with is I always thought, is there a way to make it such that you can take it? Well, let me start with this. The old adage when it comes to steadying dogs is that for a real hunter or a field trialer, remember there are actual flushing dog field trials where they have to have a dog that will hunt the best, they quarter the best, use the best nose, flush the bird the hardest, right? And also demonstrate steadiness. The old adage was, well, you need to hunt your dog for a full season without steadiness. So your dog can learn how to find the birds without any interruption at the highest level. And there's a lot of merit to that, because if you steady too early and maybe you don't really have a lot of savvy in how you do it, you may confuse the dog into the fact that when he starts smelling a bird, he needs to slow down. And that's not what we teach. And so I wanted to find out if there was a way of taking a dog without doing that full season of hunting and steadying him with a process that's not as invasive. It's a little bit more positively oriented, to be able to do it without, again, diminishing that dog's ability and confidence in finding and flushing birds, right? So I just started to break, like I do with everything else, I should start breaking it down into little steps. And the first critical one was, hey, I need to figure out how to make this dog want to sit when he sees something go up. Yet when he's sent on something on the ground, to be ultimately aggressive and just go get it, right? And so we actually do like a bird simulation. We start with tons of walk-ups first, and then we transition to getting a dog on the hunt 'em up command to go grab a dummy off the ground. So we play a little game where the dog's sitting and we basically release him with hunt 'em up, and we kind of play tug of war. Mm-hmm. I mean, the bird's on the ground, the dummy's, we make a game on, hey, when I release you, you come grab this thing and I'll play tug of war for a second. And the dog learns to basically hear hunt 'em up and run over and slam this dummy. And we've done we've already done all the walk-ups beforehand. So when we're doing that walk-up, the dog already has seen, hey, when this thing flies, I sit. So we start by getting him conditioned to confidently go slam this dummy off the ground. Plus they know to sit on the walk-up, and then we combine the two. So 50% of the time we say hunt him up, and the dog slams this dummy. The other 50% of the time we've got our hand on it. So right before he slams it, we throw it up in the air. Initially we blow the sit whistle to help him understand that's what we want. But eventually we start giving him denial when he doesn't sit when we do that.
Yeah, we step on the chep cord and stop them.
Yeah, or sit whistle on a neck. I mean, these dogs, again, they're collar conditioned and they're far enough along. And so the dog learns that, okay, I can be as ramped up gets. And I could just have, the previous time, just have slammed this dummy, full force. But the next time when as soon as that thing comes off the ground, I'm going to hear the sit command, and if I don't sit immediately, it's over. They're going to pick that dummy up, denial. So eventually, through repetition, the dog learns to do it with the sit whistle, and then we start doing without the sit whistle, just taking it away if he doesn't sit naturally. And eventually, that dummy coming up becomes the command itself to the dog. He says, okay, dummy's on the ground, free rein, slam it, go. Dummy hits the air. If you don't sit, you're done. The game's over. Otherwise, if you sit down quickly, you're going to get a mark, which is awesome. Mm-hmm. And so if you overdo one of those, too many off the ground, your dog gets too much horsepower, and maybe he doesn't want to sit when you throw it, or too many sits, too many throws, and too many times of making a dog sit, then he loses his aggression and confidence grabbing it off the ground. So you balance those two out until your dog is at that, we always talk about that word equilibrium, right? Momentum and control, equilibrium. That dog hits that equilibrium where he's still got plenty of go power to go slam that dummy off the ground, yet he's controlled enough as soon as it hits the sky to sit down. And that's our basis that we work through. And without sitting here for 3 hours and showing every detail, we eventually transition that onto at first a dead bird, and then a bird on a string, a ring-a-ding-ding bird on a string, right? and then we go to a live bird, and add gunfire, and just keep adding more elements until it becomes the eventual finished product. But there's a sequence of exercise that makes it so easy for the dog to learn. And yes, the ultimate flushing dog. You walk silently through the field. Your dog knows to stay within a certain distance, hits that bird, flushes it. You don't say a word. It's conditioned to know that the flight of the bird itself is the command. It sits down, you shoot, you don't say a word. Whenever you're ready to send the dog, you send it. And with commotion going on.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I can't wait for people to see the Upland video, because it is the ultimate lesson. Whether or not you're going to actually teach Upland or not, it would be really helpful for a lot of people who just love to play with retrievers and want to learn how to make a dog really, really steady. Because it's amazing to watch you and the team add more layers of distraction, and how you process adding those distractions in. And you can apply that same lesson of adding distractions into any sort of part of the retrieving game.
Right.
Whether that's walking to the line, whether that's sitting on the bucket, whether that's, on a diversion bird. Like, we do some pretty funny stuff on diversion birds.
You have to have a good imagination to just keep coming up with new material for your dog. So they're like, wow, I haven't seen that one, but I guess it's just another one of your diversions, another one of your, distractions.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great. I mean, I love that part about when we get to train together. It's just like, how goofy can we make our distractions for these dogs? And if somebody's watching from afar, I can't imagine what they're thinking.
Yeah, and a lot of these things, they materialized when I used to do demonstrations.
Oh yeah.
Those were I used to go to the state fair every year, and I work in conservation world at Illinois State Fair, and they would have me as the gun dog trainer, and for each successive year, I'd come up with a new act. And, there was a point where I'd have 3 retrievers sitting on place boards, and then I'd hunt a team of 2 pointing dogs. While the 3 retrievers were sitting on their place boards, I'd have a live bird in a releaser, and I'd release 2 pointing dogs. They would do a point, an honor. I'd let one of them retrieve, right? And the other dog would stay honored. Then I'd put them away, and I'd have, a whole retriever set up, launch 3 marks, but what you learn is to, as you say, layer those distractions and teach the dog first to deal with 1 distraction, then to deal with 2, 3, 4. And then eventually the dog learns, hey, it doesn't matter what happens. There's only one release word. There's only one release word, and my trainer has proven to me that anything can happen, and if that release word doesn't happen, you're not going.
Yeah.
And but if you wait long enough, you will get it. And you got to keep remembering that last part, because if that last part isn't in there, none of it will work. In other words, it's the positive reinforcement. That dog's got to believe if he sits there long enough, it's going to happen. If he jumps the gun and goes too fast, it's never going to happen. And you prove that through your actions to the dog and your training.
Yeah. So is there anything else with that you think would be important for Upland, or the Upland game can teach other parts of the retrieving game that we're talking
sure.
about? Well, you know what? Because we started with the whole, I don't want my dog to do upland because of the blind. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about that a little bit about that control.
Yeah. So, part of our program too is once we start getting a reliable basic sit on a flushed bird, then we start throwing in alternate positive reinforcements, and we start sprinkling in, okay, most of the time, dog, you're going to sit and wait and watch the bird that goes down. But other times I'm going to ask you to look at me, and then you might get a different bird, right? So now here we've got a dog that's literally just flushed a bird, watching a live bird fly away and get shot. And if I hit that sit whistle one more time, because he's already sitting, right, he'll turn and look straight at me away from the bird that just got shot, right? So how does that apply to a blind? That unconditional remote sit to look at the handler.
Find me no matter what.
Yes. Sit quickly. Find me no matter what's going on. And there's always going to be the possibility of something better than you think is out there.
Yeah.
So yes.
Look, in that scenario, when you're teaching it, you get them to look at you. And then you have a clipped wing bird in your hand and you toss it right in front of you guys.
Right.
And then you release the dog to that bird.
Right. That's exactly right. So I'm always presenting myself, I hate to say it like this, but like to them, God, right? I can say, dog, if I tell you this is going to happen, it's going to happen. If you don't sit, trust me, you will not get the bird. I will make it disappear. If you look at me, you will get something you like. It might not be what you think you like, but when you're done, you'll be happy.
Yeah.
Right? That's the way that we want to portray it to the dog. And, a properly trained dog is going to look like that. They're not going to be intimidated. They're going to be like, I can't wait to listen to you because I'm always happy with the result.
Yeah. That's
right?
a huge point.
Yeah.
I can't wait to listen to you because there's always a huge result.
Right.
That goes back to the first podcast talking about fire with fire.
Yep.
You focus on me, you're going to get what you want. So we talked about that from the blind perspective. The other thing we do is, sometimes we'll do, when we're pre-grand training, we'll set up an upland test, a couple days before the grand, which Clark thinks is crazy, but we do it because we love doing it. We set that up, we run it, and then we set up a handling drill right through the same field that they just quartered on.
Oh yeah.
And we never have an issue.
Yep.
They're smart enough to understand if you go through the proper training, hunt them up means go find a bird and have fun.
Yeah, see, the most important part of why this works, okay, is we teach the dog to engage and hunt when they're told to, and to stop doing that when we tell them. And again, there's going to be an equal positive reinforcement or reward to what they were seeking when they originally were released to hunt. So we're teaching them to turn the hunt on and turn the hunt off for an equal reward. The average guy puts his dog on an upland bird, doesn't really teach him enough, just starts blowing the whistle and punishing them when they don't. Then the dog gets spiteful, right? Because he's like, you're not giving me a direct reason. You're just punishing me if I don't sit when I'm super excited, right? And then somehow you release me sometimes, and I don't know why that is. And so that dog comes out of it like with anxiety and probably a criminal mentality, thinking if I can just fight through that.
That's a big deal. Criminal mentality.
Yeah, creating the criminal. I always talk about that. Creating the criminal mentality. I could write an article about, like a joking article about the guy that just inadvertently creates the ultimate criminal versus the guy that does it right. But yeah, it's accidental. It's accidental because people don't know how to break the process down into segments that the dog can understand and show the dog in each one of those segments. If you follow the rules, you're going to get something you want, right? That motivating factor. So when I always talk to my trainers, number one, they need to be able to state their objective with whatever they're doing. Number two, what are the positive reinforcements? What's the motivating factor for the dog? Number three, what are your control mechanisms and punishments that you're going to employ? Okay. If you don't know those when you're getting your dog out, just stop for a moment and think about what you're going to do. Okay. For instance, I'm going to take my dog out. I'm going to get him out of the car and I'm going to air him out. Number one, what's your objective? Well, I want the dog to get out, sit down and look at me and be disciplined and not run around the parking lot and make me scream and yell at it, right? Then I'm going to release my dog to go to the bathroom. He's going to go do it. And then I'm going to call my dog back when it's over with, okay? So although you might do that every day, if you're a good trainer, you're going to say, okay, state my objective. My objective is to do what I just said. Okay, what's my positive reinforcement? Well, my positive reinforcement, well, I got to think about it. What's positive? Well, does the dog want to get out of the crate? Yes. Does the dog want to be released to go run around and pee? Yes. So those are the motivating factors. Those are your positive reinforcements. Number 3, what are your punishments you're going to use if the dog doesn't do it? And does the dog understand? Have you taught him to understand those? Yeah, the punishments would be a sit, Nick, with a collar. Yes, I've taught the dog. Okay, so do you have your collar on? Is it on the dog? Oh, no, I forgot. Well, put the collar on the dog. Is it turned on? Did you test it? Okay. So you know what your positives are. Now you know what your control mechanisms and your dog understands the repercussions if it doesn't do it. Okay, now employ it. We open the dog crate. Say the dog sits in the crate nicely. Step 1. Done. Okay, we release the dog, and then their four paws hit the ground. We say sit. Dog doesn't sit. Sit, Nick. Dog sits finally. Give him a treat. Put him back in the crate. Start over. Release the dog out of the crate. He gets to the ground. We say sit. Now he sits. Good. He looks at us thinking he's going to get a treat. We release him. Say be quick or whatever. Go to potty or whatever you say. Now the dog goes to the bathroom. Dog's able to go relieve itself, do what it wanted to do in the first place, and it learned to go through us to get it. Right? Now we call it back. Dog doesn't come back to us. We give it a correction. Dog comes back, give it a treat, release it again, let it go wander off, call it back. Now it comes back the right way, give him a treat. Dog learned to do it with no punishment. And now, so this is one guy that's just airing his dog. He did it right. He got training out of it. Mm-hmm. The other guy's airing his dog. He got either nothing out of it or actually might have created more of a criminal mentality with his dog, because he's trying to control it. He didn't have the collar ready. He didn't think about how he was going to do it. So the dog came out of it and said, well, I heard sit, didn't sit all the way.
And it was okay.
It's fine. I got what I wanted anyway. I just took off and I got what I wanted the wrong way, right? Just like a kid that goes and steals candy from a store. He got what he wanted. He got it the wrong way. Creating the criminal mentality with your dog.
And I think if this goes back to never giving a command that you can't reinforce.
That's right.
And so if you're going to air your dog without a collar, you better just wait till they come back.
Yep. Or have some massive positive reinforcement available.
A bird sometimes, whatever that is.
Yep. And don't blow your cover.
Yep.
Right? If you've accidentally let your dog out and you're like, oh no, this is the part where he doesn't listen, don't give him a command. Simple as that. Go grab a bag of treats, a bumper.
Go do a cartwheel so he's like, what the heck are you doing? And he comes over.
Use a trick. You know your dog. You know what he's going to fall for. Take your leash and grab a bumper and stick it on the end of the leash and start waving it around and jerking it around. Let the dog start running over and grabbing it and playing with you. And then before he knows it, you've got his collar in his hand, and then breathe a sigh of relief. Put the collar back on him. Now you have control and go about what you should have done in the first place. Right. So, and that all goes back to, that all goes back to being able to state what your objective is. If you can slow yourself down and use creative visualization in what you're going to do. Hey, what am I about to do? What's likely to happen? And you will go through these and go, you know what? I'm really glad I thought about that, because I need to go put this collar on, or I forgot my leash back home. Maybe I should go get it. You'll start catching yourself and then realizing afterwards, wow, that could have been a disaster. Evade it. And then when you do mess up, because we all do, don't start screaming commands that you can't and you don't have control over. Use a different way. Distract your dog. Use a little trick. Get him back under control. Get your control implements back on the dog, and then resume. Yeah.
An example of that I do is like when I'm airing my dog in my house. I mean, I'm not all the time putting a collar on it, but when I need him to come back in, I don't say heel. I don't say here. I go blah, 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 and they figured out that means come back and get inside the house.
Yeah, in the worst case scenario, they're not in the mood to listen, so you say blah, 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 and they don't listen to you.
You didn't lose anything. That is a reinforceable command.
Right, exactly. So I hope hope the listeners of this, if that's all they get out of this, is the last part, which is, you have to have control of the scenario, and you need to think about what the scenario is. That's where 90% of mistakes are made, is people don't think about what's going to happen. They just go and then think after the occurrence happens.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's it. That's good. It's good stuff. Well, I want to talk a little bit, you and I are always talking about puppies and marking, and those are like my two favorite topics. Well, when we teach puppy marking, I think that we kind of have a little bit of a process to do that, and I think it would be fun to kind of share a little bit about that.
Yes, excuse me, I got an itch here. Okay, so big chapter. We always should go about any sort of training process with finding a way, first of all, defining what we want. Because if we don't, just like anybody successful in the world, go all the way to the end goal and then work backwards to get it. Because if you don't know what your end goal is, then you have no business trying to make it. You won't know what the plan is to get there. So our end goal is to have a dog that sits steady, observes a mark, stays focused on that mark, waiting to be released, is released on that, runs straight to a very small area where that bird, hopefully straight to it, but if not, within a very small area, and knows to engage the hunting process when they get to that area. Quickly, rapidly hunts the object up, picks it up as quick as possible, comes straight back to the handler, gets into the sit position wherever the handler tells him to, composes themselves, meaning sitting and not moving, including their mouth, and delivers the object. Okay, so that's what we want. So we're going to a puppy can't learn all these things at once, so we need to break it down. Well, the first thing is, if our dog is not interested in a retrieve, then we've lost it. So creating a desire, creating an understood protocol, a game, creating a game that the dog recognizes, right? By doing puppy marks, playing in the house, all these things you'll see in these puppy videos that we make, teaching the dog without giving the dog the ability to pick up a bad habit. So having a check cord on, doing it down a hallway, backing up and praising as a dog, so encourage the dog to want to come back, right? We do all those things. So we create just the basic retrieve in an environment where, number one, all the other elements are taken out of it, right? We know they're going to see it because we use a big object in open grass. It's an object that's not going to hurt their mouth. It's conducive. It's light enough and easy and fun for them to carry. We've got a check cord on. We're making sure that we make it fun to come back. When the dog gets to us, we're making a little party and creating this fun protocol so the dog wants to come back to us because they are looking forward to the activities they're going to get when they get back to us. So we start with creating that game first. And once we've got that game and that protocol understood, and the dog is looking forward in anticipation to play it, so we've built momentum to play this game. Then we're going to present we're going to start adding more factors. So we're going to start adding steadiness. Well, we taught the dog to be steady at the food bowl. We taught the dog to be steady at a threshold to the door. We taught the dog to be steady and sit and wait and look at us for a treat. We taught the dog to be steady sitting on the place board and then being released to go get a treat. We taught the dog to be steady and sit and wait to be released to go see another dog or another person, right? So we've already created that steadiness program. Now we teach the same thing with the dummy. So we do our squat steady process, teach the dog that when he sees this object, which he already understands, easy parameters, already seen the game before, but now he's got to sit and wait to be released. He's seen it a million places. In 30 seconds, the dog learns, oh, and under these parameters, when I heard the word sit, when you're cradling in between your legs, the only way to get this dummy is to calm down and sit.
And have composure.
I want
to interject here for one second, because I think this is an important point. Everything we're talking about is under the assumption that we have a dog that has a lot of momentum and a desire to go get that bird.
Right. Take a step back.
Take a step back.
Genetically.
Yeah. If they want to get that bird.
Right.
Everything that we're going to be talking about is that they have a desire to go get that bird. And anytime you see yourself getting on the other end of that momentum spectrum where you're like, okay, I don't have the momentum I need, you bring that back up through either fun bumpers, which is releasing the dog by saying their name and waving that bumper and just doing little tosses, or whatever you're going to do under a non-steady. You're releasing the dog prior to throwing the retrieve. That's the key about making sure that you're creating that momentum. But my point, the reason I wanted to interject is, I believe, and I think you believe the same thing, is if you have a dog that has a lot of momentum, a lot of people think that steadying will bring back that, or will lower that momentum. And I believe we have found that to be the exact opposite. And I want to unpack that a little bit right here, is that because we're teaching them how they get that bird, they want that bird even more.
Well, I wouldn't say that it's going to diminish momentum by any means, because we're careful to avoid misunderstanding. Okay. So we're creating an environment where the dog really understands first of all, how to be successful, and to be successful involves composure. It takes a lot of repetition and time, but because the dog's not getting excessive pressure and he understands what he's supposed to be doing, and he's getting, and this is the key thing with any training, you're getting a high level of success, meaning you're presenting it in a simple enough venue that the dog can actually be successful 75% plus times. Then they haven't put themselves into excessive failure. And we also are using as much attrition or non-punishment situations as possible. So our dogs are not going to have diminished momentum because they don't associate any negativity with the exercise. Okay. And their success is high. Okay. So they're going to be just like an athlete. Say you have an athlete, you got Michael Jordan, right? He's super successful, basketball player. He's not going to walk into a game and go, oh, I don't know. He's going to go, I'm going to get success by being disciplined and using my athleticism in a craftful manner that I've gotten before, because I've gotten that success many times doing it before. He's going to walk in confident. His momentum's going to be great because he's confident in himself. So you lose momentum when you start using punishment and confuse a dog.
Yeah, when in their mind it's not a just correction because they don't get it.
That's right. Or you overdo it and you grind a dog to the point where they're getting bored with it.
Because they're not, because you did too much of it.
And that's a major concept with puppies. So quitting while the dog is in the right psychological state during these moments where the dog's impressionable is of the utmost importance. Less is more. Less is more. Do it right, and less is more. Do it the right way, and then get your success. Less is more. You get your success the right way, your dog's brain will be programmed just like hitting the save button on a computer. Hit that save button when that essay looks just right, and that's what you're going to get when you recover that document. It'll be just the way that you wanted to leave it, right? If you keep grinding it, because we all do it. Like you get your puppy out, you just bought him.
You're crushing it and you're excited.
So excited. And you finally got to the point where you're doing puppy retrieves and your buddy's over there and you're like, hey, watch this.
That's the worst.
Right. And you do it one more time and then the dog gets distracted, bored, whatever it might be. And then you can't recover that. You're not going to recover it then. The only way to even come close to recovering it, which you may not, is to put them away and let the dog's batteries recharge, right? And then let them see it again, create a new button. But anyway, you quit early too. That's a major concept. But anyway, getting back to marking concepts, now we have a dog that understands how to sit steady and go straight to an object because it's all been simplified.
And they can see the mark the whole time.
That's right.
Visually, because I think it's important that we mention, like, we want dogs, and specifically puppies, to mark with their eyes. When they get to that spot and they can't see the bird, then they make that switch.
Right.
And I think that's a key component that a lot of people don't do, is they bring their puppy to their big dog setup and they're like, well, I'll just throw the marks shorter. But the dog still can't see that bird the whole time.
If you're finding yourself walking into a setup going, I'll just run what they run. just overall, guys, stop. Please stop. Because every training procedure, and we're talking about puppies, I don't want to get too far offline, but every training procedure is reliant on knowing what your dog is supposed to learn. And if you walk into somebody else's setup, it might not be conducive to what you're trying to train at all. So anyway, again, what is marking in general? Marking is watching where something goes down and running straight to where it fell. So we find ways of helping the dog learn how to do that uninhibited or with little possibility of failure as possible. So we do a lot of, I call it visual aid marking. And with that involves throwing something the dog can literally see from the vantage point of where he's sent the whole way, right? That's complete visual aid marking. And it's a powerful thing, but it's also a dangerous thing. So there'll be a lot of these little learning aids, buzzer blinds, which we'll talk about it in a different podcast, but any of these other things that we use, which seem like magical devices, but they can also be misused and overused, right? Yeah. So we get our puppy to the point where he'll go a long way, hand throwing just from the line, hand throwing objects, starting short and then working our way out as our dog shows that they understand how to be successful in an environment, and slowly moving out to the point where we're throwing these objects that the dog can see the whole way, like mowed yard, right? Big white paint roller, whatever you're throwing, it's conducive for your dog. But eventually your dog learns within hand throwing distance. By the way, I like using the little Dockins, the real small Dockins for puppies. Why? Because you can throw them a long way. And if you have one that's not white, you can just buy some white duct tape and put a little strip of white duct tape around it. Otherwise, if your dog's in that period of development where he's losing his puppy teeth, i.e. 4 to 6 months, you may have to switch to something really soft.
That's we use paint rollers primarily, but there is a point where you can't throw those really far.
Right.
And so those Dockins come in really handy when you start making that change.
Yes. And if hopefully you're doing that before the dog gets to that 4 months time frame, because right at that 4.5 months, they start losing some critical teeth and their mouth starts hurting. So then you have to pretty much resort to only really soft, light stuff. And the paint roller obviously is the best of any object that I've ever seen. There are some other ones, but
pool noodle works pretty good too.
Yeah, pool noodle and some other things that you'll see on the video. Just be crafty. I've had guys just take a sock and fill it up with other socks and put a zip tie in the end. I mean, whatever you need to do to get your dog to be able to two things: be able to see it and easily pick it up without hurting the teeth. Yeah. Right.
So just to keep us moving here, our progression is we throw visually aided marks. Right, where they can see it, where there's nothing in between them. They can see that mark. They get confident. Whether it's probably like 100 marks, both hand thrown and thrown from a gunner in the field. Right. But then we start to do a couple things. This is when we start to diverge into kind of two different schools of thought in our puppy marking, which we haven't talked a lot about publicly. Well, one of them is we start to interject, whether that's a little bit of cover or a hill where the dog cannot see the object the entire time. So that's the next step that you're doing with visual aid marking. As soon as they break through that little tiny object, they are rewarded with seeing the white object sitting out there. And so let's talk about that for just a brief moment, then we'll talk about the other side.
Right, and I refer to that as partial visual aid marking. So now the dog sees the visual aid go up, down, he loses it, can't see it, but knows where it, the general line that it fell, starts running, and then in a short period of time sees it again. Yeah. So you can throw it over the crest of a really lightly rolling hill. You could throw it where there's a little tiny bit of cover in between, and just literally go out to the place that you're going to do it and look where you're going to throw it. And usually the hill crest works really nice. So if you find a public area or a backyard or something where it's mowed and there's just a little bit of a hill crest. That's my favorite because there's nothing really to run around. We don't want our dog to learn to run around cover or any sort of obstacle. So
if you do use the cover as your obstacle, say you don't have that gradual hill, it needs to be really long.
Yeah, so there's no obvious way to run around it, right?
Yeah.
But you want it so the dog just gets and when you first do it, you want it where the dog only runs just maybe 20 feet and is able to see it. But then our dog learns to trust their eyes, that they will eventually get close enough where they can see it again. Okay, so theoretically, you got a dog that you can throw an object out in a mowed yard as far as possible, and it'll go straight to it. You got a dog that you can throw over a little hill, and he trusts that if he just stays on that line, it'll eventually appear. Okay, now we're going to teach our dog to hunt, which is another kind of the opposite end of the spectrum.
And we kind of separate these.
Yes, completely separate. Like a lot of things in dog training, you create each one of them separate, and then you add them together. So we'll go to a place where there's cover that's just heavy enough to kind of barely hide an object, and we'll do a fun retrieve where the dog's literally chasing it out there. Mm-hmm. So he's watching it bounce.
And a fun retrieve is you say their name, you wave it around, you get them excited about it, then you toss it, but they're released, they're not steady, and they're chasing the bird in the air.
Yeah, so it's defined to them that they are not supposed to be steady, so they can't misconstrue that they were told to be steady. So yeah, you release them, get them moving. I usually say their name several times to create that protocol. The dog understanding, okay, I'm released. When I hear this, I don't have to sit. I'm being told to move. But anyway, fun retrieve. Let them chase it into the grass that's just heavy enough to cover up the object. The dog knows it's there because they're 10 feet from it when it bounced.
Yeah, they almost caught it in the air.
but we're using an object now that they can't see as well. So maybe a Dachshund, maybe whatever, tennis balls, something that is just not so obvious, but it's got your scent on it. It's got scent, whether it's a scent of
They've retrieved it many times. They're associated with the smell.
Right. And I will do this with dogs, with birds too, but I wouldn't recommend using birds if you don't have to. If your dog's got enough desire to do an inanimate object, start with that first, because if you start using birds too early, your dog may become a caviar dog, right? And say, well, I'm not going to retrieve it unless it's a bird because that's all I want. So I try to encourage people to let us help you figure out when birds are right for your dog. Some dogs can have birds every other day and it wouldn't hurt them. Other dogs, if you give them one bird, you may disturb your momentum for inanimate objects. And inanimate objects are what everybody has at their free will to use all the time.
You can use at parks most of the time.
Yeah, right. So anyway, we got this dog now that we do a fun retrieve into heavier grass, heavier meaning just enough to cover it. And he figures out how to go to that area and look around a little bit and start to engage his nose to find it. We start really easy, and as the dog gets better, then we can throw it into heavier grass. And eventually we teach the dog in that venue to hunt. So now it knows how to watch something go down, get into the area, and hunt until they find it.
But it's really controlled. You're within throwing another bumper. If they start to leave the area, you can toss another bumper, help the dog find it. So it's a really controlled hunt. I think that's something that I want to make sure that people understand, is that we're not throwing a mark, per se out of a winger, where the dog can't see it the whole time and runs and doesn't even get close to success.
Right.
And then they just failed, because what happens is they develop the gorilla hunt mentality or the big hunt mentality. And that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to say, run with your eyes, trust your eyes, get to that area. And then if you fail, turn into hunt mode.
Right.
And if they have enough success, their hunt area is not going to be that large.
Right.
They're going to generally, if you slowly start working your dog out, because I think there's two things. You can stretch a dog out really far if you're doing visual aid marking.
Yes.
Where they can see it the whole time. We teach puppies.
But it's a dangerous tool at the same time.
It's dangerous if you think they can see it and then they really can't.
And it's dangerous also. And then I'm just giving an example from my personal kind of testing with it, because I've I even developed a prototype dummy that a dog can see from 300 yards, but it's light enough where he can pick it up. I mean, it looks like they've got two paper towels in their mouth. It looks like two paper towel rolls with a stick in between. But I wanted to create something for my dogs that are in the basics program to be confident and run out. So I created this black and white thing that literally, if our field is mowed, they can see it from 400 yards out, as plain as day. And I've had dogs that will unconditionally run to this thing 400 yards away, not even look at the gun. All that's great. And then I overdo that. And they haven't learned. I haven't done enough hunting marks lately where that when they get there, they got to use their nose to find it, and then they start overrunning everything, thinking if I just keep running, I'm going to see this thing.
Yeah.
And they run to Texas.
Yeah, it's a balancing act, right?
Right. So once I get them marking out to the distance that I need them to mark with the visual aid marking, then we begin to throw partial visual aid marking and zero visual aid marking in under more simple pretenses.
Yeah, it's always lagging, right?
Right. So we're stretching the dog out with the visual aid marking, and the partial visual aid marking is maybe a quarter of the way back. So let's just say I have a dog. I can do the visual aid marking out to 200 yards, and I can use partial visual aid marking craftfully in the right place out to 150 yards with that dog. I might be working at 100 yards with zero visual aid marking where, I might be using a dock in an 8-inch grass where he can find it pretty easily when he gets there, but he's still going to have to engage his nose. So I'm backing that up. And then that same dog with a more powerful scented object like a bird, I might be back at 60 yards throwing
it in super high cover
and heavier cover, right? So they learn to hunt, and all of those are done in the same general time frame. So one day I might take all my basic dogs out and go, all right, we're stretching them out today, boys. We're all visual marks. And then the next day I might go, all right, we're going to throw some partial visual aid marking in. And we've got a great setup. So our retriever field's got a light roll to it. And a lot of times what I'll do is, let's say I can't always get it mowed perfectly down all the time, right? So when I can't do that, we'll actually we have a bunch of brush piles out there that we move around, so it kind of looks like the Grand, Yeah. But we'll mow these circles. They look like crop circles, for God's sakes, are near and around these brush piles. And so say the grass is like 8 inches, and I've got a dog that will visual aid perfectly out to 200. So I'm going to go like 175, and I'm going to throw a white dummy into this circle that I've mowed near. Mm-hmm. So he's got to run 170 yards, probably 160 yards through that 8-inch grass. But then he's going to get to a circle, like a 20-yard circle that's mowed to the ground with a white dummy that's sitting right in the middle of it.
Yep.
So he can't see that when he takes off, but when he gets about 40, 50 yards away, there it is sitting there, right? So that'll help get that dog further. And then I might do that with visual or partial visual. And then I might do that same mark or one very similar to it right afterwards with a dock in where he's not going to see it. And he just has to trust the line, and he puts on a little hunt at the end. So we're blending all these as we go, and we're making sure we include enough of each one of them such that our dog shows competence in all of them.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where, you get into the hunting marks, you get to the little bit more of a chance of failure. And that's when you have to have, an educated bird person, because once that dog is released, the trainer becomes the bird boy, right? Because if that dog fails, it's not up to us at this point. And we're not handling our dogs yet. So we have to have either a bird boy that understands a certain language and has got a radio and is ready to rock and roll, or a bird boy that's savvy. A lot of times I bird boy for my dogs. I'll have my apprentice trainer, and I've got a radio, so if I see something south, I can tell the trainer what to do, but I'll have my apprentice trainer throwing, because again, once you start risking failure.
You'll throw.
I will throw. Yeah. And that way, if I see the dog's breaking down, I can throw a popcorn mark, which basically means throw another mark and scream. So the dog looks up as he's running and says, oh, there it is. Or I might let the dog completely fail and have the guy call him back, and then we simplify it. Mm-hmm. And so if I see a habit developing that I don't like, and this is not very often, but it gives me the ability to do what I need to do to make sure that dog comes out of the scenario thinking the way that I need him to think, which is go out there. If you don't find it exactly where you think it was, hunt in that area until you find it, come back. Go to the area, hunt, quickly pick it up, come back.
Yeah.
Right. And so we could talk about marking for hours, but in general, that's the program that we use, and it works very well.
Yeah. And I think what's important for people to remember is that what is your primary objective for this mark? Is it to get them to be comfortable going distance? Is it about them busting through a piece of cover? Is it about them having confidence in the mark? Is it about them, learning how to use their nose. You're making a primary objective. You're not just throwing a mark and seeing what's going to happen.
Right.
And I think that if in doubt, if you weren't sure in which one of those to do and your dog's pretty balanced, probably at a younger age, it's better to do a visual aid marking, because it's really easy to maintain a dog with a good discipline or a good practice of marking with their eyes. It's really hard once they start to hunt before they should. It's really hard to get them to mark with their eyes again.
Yeah. So let's talk about pattern behaviors. A habit is difficult to break, just like with people, and it will keep coming back. You might think you have it completely eliminated, but there's something called spontaneous recovery in human and dog psychology, and that basically means, boy, you think you've fixed. Let's say we have a dog, for instance, that's hunting early because we didn't do enough visual aid marks. And our dog learned to break down and start hunting and hunt his way back to the mark. We took a young dog and we started throwing him where there was drag back. And that dog learned to run 3/4 of the way, find drag back, and work its way to the bird.
Do loops to it.
Right. And so now we got a dog that really doesn't mark.
Yeah.
It partially marks and then hunts the rest, which will kill you. So we're trying to fix that. So say we go to complete visual aid, and we throw all these different techniques at the dog. He may come back to that at the worst time. You might think, we got this dog, he's fixed. And then you might see it come back. It's called spontaneous recovery. So going back to the point, we want to train. I would rather have a dog that you do more visual aid marking with, that is always getting to the fall area, and then work backwards from there, than to have it the opposite way, where you've got a dog who's really great at hunting once he gets there, but has trouble getting there.
Yeah. You might be able to get through the early level hunt test game.
Right.
But when you start to get to finished and you start to get to the grand level stuff, that stuff isn't you're not gonna make it through.
Yeah, think about it from the dog's perspective. Say that you do a lot of this visual aid marking, and the dog in partial visual aid marking to the point where the dog's like, look, I can see a gun out there at 300 yards. And I see which way he throws it. I see the object flying through the air. I don't care where the gun is. I'm running straight at that mark. There's nothing, once that mark hits the ground, there's nothing else in the world that exists. I'm running straight to it. You take that dog and then you start throwing oppositional marks and marks that influence each other. That dog already is starting under the pretense that nothing else in the world matters. The mark is the mark. Go to the mark. Trust to go to the mark. Don't look at the bird boy on the way by. He's not going to throw another bird. I already know how to run straight to that mark without any assistance. Well, that's done through visual aid marking. Get him to do that. And then once he starts seeing other things in the field, he already knows how to ignore those and run right to where the bird fell. Right? So if you create that mentality early, another great one, guys, too. And this is not something to do a lot, but I love doing this. Is one of my favorite things because it works every time. We have white pigeons, and occasionally, especially in the wintertime, you'll have a mowed bean field or an old mowed pasture somewhere where they're literally a dog can see 400 yards
to a white little pigeon.
Right. And so we'll start out with this puppy and we'll just hand throw this wing clip bird and with the wind at our back and just literally a fun retrieve, release the dog, hey, and throw it. And this wing clip bird will flutter 70 yards in the wind. And that dog's eyes are locked on this bird the whole time. He's just running and chasing and watching and running and chase. And then we do 2 or 3 of those and then we do it in a steady format. Right. And so now the dog's watching this bird. But anyway, he gets the idea of keep your eye on the bird just instinctually. He's going to look at it. He wants it. It's white. It's a giant contrast with the background. And once they do that, once that I can get a dog sitting steady and squat steady and a little puppy going 70 yards out in a bean field for this big white target, like screaming at him, then I can put a gun out there. And they've picked it up without a gun and not been distracted by anything else. There's no obstacles. There's nothing else. And I can put the gun out there. Like the first time, I can put a gun out there at 150 yards. And that wing clip is going to be thrown really far because they flutter. They like flight assist, and they're going to go way down. That dog is not going to pay attention. First of all, the pigeon's going to stand up and start walking. Yeah. Right? That dog is going to stare at that thing and go 150 yards straight, and he's learning how to keep his eye locked. He's learning how to keep his eye locked on the object and the area the object fell. We're setting precedent of how to do it right. So, again, we don't use birds all the time, but occasionally we will do that, and that'll help increase momentum. And it also teaches the dog to do what we want him to do in general with regards to focus. Focus on the object, run straight to it. So
good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, Dan, that was a really, really good podcast segment. I think there's a lot of really, really good information. I love like the criminal mentality, and how not to create that. I think that's something that's really important for people to get and listen to. I think understanding more how the upland game and walk-ups can be, really helpful in teaching a dog wanting to be steady.
Sure. And
wanting to sit, and then, puppy marking. So that was really fun. Appreciate your time, and I'm sure we're going to do it again real soon.
Yes, sir.